So, hello everyone. Um, Going through a number of applications just to check that everything is working fine. We have a PowerPoint presentation that I'm gonna run for Alex. Hi, Alex. Thank
Hi,
you for
Ralph.
joining us. So we are very, very happy, thrilled to have Alex Liu with us today on this webinar about joy, finding joy at work from home. As we all have been forced to work from home for the last few months. Some of them have had the pleasure to, or the opportunity to leave our homes and to go back to the office. But it seems like working from home is going to be one of the new trends for the coming period. It's going to be quite a long period of time, I guess. It's creating a lot of stress. It's making it difficult for us to adapt to this new reality. And Alex has been going in depth in the subject of finding joy at work way before the Corona crisis. He's going to tell us a bit more about that, when he started and so on. He has been working with organizations all over the world. Going to try to take a little bit of what you told me. So a little bit of background about Kearney, unless you want to do it yourself, Alex. A background about Kearney. Kearney is a global consulting firm of about 3,500 staff in 40 countries with over 90 years history. And Kearney is the fourth largest private partnership in top management consulting, working in both private and public sector, all major industries, with a focus on strategic operations and transformation type assignments, digital, mergers and acquisitions, and otherwise. A word about Alex. Alex is the chairman and managing partner in his third year in the current role. He has 30 years of consulting experience and has worked in all major regions with a focus on technology and communications clients. He has served on a number of boards, as well as the World Economic Forum International Business Council of top 100 CEOs. An ambassador of the joy topic, he has published in nothing less but the Harvard Business Review on the topic, and hosts a podcast on joy at work. A little bit of information about how we work in Zoom for the people who are joining us for the first time. Some of you have been working with us, have been attending our webinars already once or twice. So what you see is you have buttons on your screen. There's a Q&A button, and there is a chat button. There should be a chat button. With the chat, you can communicate with us or with all the attendees eventually. Through the Q&A, you can ask questions to Alex or to me. Those questions can be upvoted by selecting the thumbs up, by pressing on the thumbs up. So if you see a question in the Q&A section, go to that section once in a while. You will see notifications that there is a new question. If you see a question there that you find interesting, just press on the thumbs up and it's going to go up. Questions can be answered on Alex's appreciation live during his talk. So we spoke with Alex before, and he said that you can always, it can be very interactive, and he's very open to be challenged. So I'm going to, if you don't do that, I'm going to do that. I'm going to challenge Alex once he's done talking. Maybe I will interrupt you. And of course, some questions can be answered at the end of the Q&A. So without further ado, Alex, if you're ready, I'll set everything up. Are you ready?
Yes, I am ready. Thanks, Ralph.
Okay, so your video should be now the main video, and the screen of your presentation should be live now.
No. Well, first, thank you for the invitation, Ralph, to be here and join your colleagues in your community. And I'm speaking to you from Montreal, so another bilingual part of the world. I guess you're in Brussels. I listened quite intently to some of your prior webinars on Krav Maga and body language, so I hope I can do my part to add to the global discussion here. As you, I think as you mentioned, what I'd like to do maybe is just offer some perspectives, principles, things that I've learned in looking at this topic, and also add a dose of practicality on some of the topics of how are people coping and how are our clients coping, for example, in a new world. Because if you look at the title, the definition of joy is quite different these days when you have justice issues, you have the health crisis, and of course the general economic uncertainty. And the definition of what is a workplace has changed a lot. So you're right, pre-COVID, this was a topic, but it has an interesting wrinkle going forward. Maybe the next page. Let me just talk a little bit about the premise. I think as leaders of your companies and communities, we always want to get the most out of our people, the people agenda, maximum energy, maximum engagement, maximum satisfaction, and maximum joy. Now, why is it that we spend so much of our time at work and people don't feel that to be the case? It's not just enough to be seen and supported, as I mentioned, it's about being safe, right? Depending on your demographic and depending on your health status these days. So being safe, seen, and supported is probably not enough. I think what we'd all like to do as leaders is to actually inspire, is to get people to become championship teams. I've followed sports all my life, and I'm not the biggest and fastest and the strongest, but I've always found that there's always a role for everyone on the team. And so when you look at joy at work, it has to be, how do you realize your individual potential in a team environment? How do you have a winning spirit? So I think this question of why, if we spend so much time at work, and these days probably all of our time at work on videos, et cetera, why can't we have more satisfaction? Now, what we did, and you mentioned this, Ralph, at the beginning, it's very important for me because obviously I'm leading a services firm. So you cannot separate what you provide as advice to your clients and your companies that you serve from how it's delivered. So if you don't have joyful, happy, loyal, purpose-driven staff and partners, you can't do your job. So to me, it's very important from a personal business perspective, as well as a individual, boy, I'd like to be happy perspective. We'd all like to be happy. What we did, maybe the next page would be helpful. We did some research on this. And again, it's not meant to be completely scientific. And it was used eventually in documents for the Harvard Business Review article, Making Joy a Workplace Priority, as well as a number of discussions at the World Economic Forum, because it's becoming quite a topic, culture, mental health. But we asked some questions around the world. This is across millennials, across geographies, companies that were of a certain size, not pure startups. Please go back, I'm sorry. And we asked them, how many of you expect to have joy at work and how many of you actually feel it? And obviously there's a gap of over 50%. So over 50% of our workers, people that we work with, our colleagues, are basically dissatisfied. And we looked underneath that. I mean, why is this to be the case? That's a human tragedy. If you think about the productivity, the satisfaction, the drudgery that people are enduring, why can't work be an outcome of success and happiness versus the other way around, something that you have to endure? So this is what we call the joy gap. So as leaders, what can we do to close that gap? And more importantly, why is it that there is a gap? And as I explored this, and in my podcast, we talked to a number of folks, I mean, there are some aspects of curiosity and teamwork and the like, which come together. And I'll come to those lessons in a second. But the starting point has to be, there's a problem. And I would imagine, and we're supplementing with research now in the COVID world and the world of social crises, can you have joy without justice? Is this gap widening? Is the feeling of alienation, isolation, mental health actually going the other way? So now so it's about the joy gap in our lives, not just at work. Maybe the next page, Ralph. And I've always been a big sports fan. I played rugby. This is my favorite sport, even in college. And, you know, again, I'm probably not the biggest and strongest, but I'm actually pretty much of a playmaker. So I played scrum half or point guard on basketball or shortstop in US baseball. And what I found is that if you have a purpose that's bigger than yourself, whether it's your firm or your team, and you're playing for championships, it doesn't really matter as long as you have the right role, that you're helping each other succeed. And I think the analogy of transferring the outcomes, the joy, the spirit, the camaraderie, the global community of team sports, can that be applied to the workplace and the societies that we have? So in the research, we did the joy gap, and we also looked at some reasons why companies that have a higher joy index have certain attributes more than the others. Maybe the next piece of research, which I highlighted, would be key.
Next slide.
Yeah, next, please. Thank you, Ralph. And that it's pretty simple. If you think about what role you have in the firm or your unit or your geography or your company, is it adding something to the society? Are you celebrating a purpose? Are you delivering certain types of services to the marketplace? Are you helping clients achieve their full potential, for example, if you're a consultant? And do you have teammates that you can count on? These are not probably magical ingredients, but these are the elements of true teamwork. You have harmony in the team, common purpose, you have a common objective, you have impact, and you share the credit. But if you look at the workplace, a lot of what's in the way stands in this way. You have a lot of silos, you have layers, you have internal competition, which is probably more vicious than competition with your competitors. You have egos. So as leaders, one of the things I try to do for our company is to delayer and have this aspects that I have on this page here and smiley faces. But I look at clients that want to go through transformation journeys, whether it's the change of a digital technology or a new merger and acquisition, or it's just improving operations. And the thing that gets in the way is not the idea, but it's the people energy behind understanding why it makes sense. Why will our teams be stronger? Why would I want to change to some purpose that's now defined by someone else? So I think as leaders, we need to acknowledge that these are three elements that need to take place. And the research points that out. It's not definitive. We did a correlation. The people that tend to have more joy, whether it's millennials or baby boomers or Generation Xers, believed also that their firm had these aspects in greater dimension. And this was reflected in the article, the HBR article. Now, what's interesting is that the online editor said that usually you don't get a lot of interest for these types of articles in the middle of the summer. There were 70,000 downloads in the first day for this topic. So we know that there is a real interest in the topic of making joy a workplace priority. So anyway, that's a little bit on the why. Maybe the next page, Ralph. Thank you. So I guess the question then becomes, okay, if there's a why and a what to try to achieve, what are some of the things that can be done to achieve greater workplace harmony, impact, acknowledgement, and therefore joy? A part of this is the linkage to the core purpose and values of your firm. Obviously, companies, your employees are picking companies for some sort of fit. They like the industry, they like the people, they like the leadership. But at least for us, it's much more than that. It's the values from our founding of essential rightness that is reinforced by values. We have 5 core values: generosity and solidarity, which is the basis and foundation for teamwork. Passion, curiosity, and boldness are the other 3, which are the foundations of individual excellence and the apprenticeship model. We put that into a dial-up mode: diversity, inclusion, apprenticeship, leadership. And we make that a part of our brand and a part of how we work with each other. So at least the agenda has to be clear to the employees that you want this to happen. We also, for example, have a global engagement survey every six months. It's a very millennial-friendly 5-minute survey, and there's a whole algorithm behind it. But the mere point of asking your employees, how do you feel? Do you feel included, belonging, sense of purpose, strategy, apprenticeship? Do you have role models? Do you believe we have a winning chance in the marketplace? And then the correlation links up to engagement. And so making joy, making engagement an explicit purpose, tracking it actually improves the engagement scores, and it allows employees to feel engaged. So setting the agenda, setting the stage. If you're working on projects internally, you know, have cross teams and having fun. I'll talk to that in a minute about the work from home examples. But setting the agenda and setting the stage are very important. And most importantly, do you believe? The personal example, communicating. As we say in consultants, in the consulting world, you know, it's very easy for clients to tell whether you have content and competence. That's very clear. But what will make you irresistible as a provider of services and as a trusted advisor is the amount of care. Do you care about the topic? Do you care about diversity and inclusion? Do you care about social justice? Do you care about employee engagement? Do you really care about teamwork? Or are you cascading metrics and silos and metrics and having your units compete with each other? So anyway, I think there's so much that leaders can do. And I explored this in the podcast. Maybe the next page, Ralph, thank you. This was the elements of the HBR article. So what I did, I mean, we've had season 1, and this was pre-COVID, and I think a lot of the topics will continue to be evergreen going into season 2, but maybe with a different twist. And again, it's had more positive feedback than we had thought. It was meant to be just B2B, but we have a number of communities that are interested in this topic. I was really amazed at the number of folks interested in culture, mental health, employee health, community well-being. Ingrid Fetterly, as you know, is a very famous TED Talk. She hit on sort of how our physical surroundings, design, colors, shapes, inside, outside, plants inside, affect the way we interact, and our mind is connected in a positive way. John Levy is the fellow who pioneered the influencer dinners, is written about in the New York Times and the New Yorker, where he brings people anonymously together, and the fact that they meet new people, don't know who they are, and they have a guessing game. They test the boundaries of their comfort zone, and it's, the more learning you do from each other, the more joy you have. Katherine Parsons is an entrepreneur in the UK, talked about education and helping people, even baby boomers like myself and younger people like you, Ralph, learn how to code in 2 days and get in a modern world, and using technology learning to actually excite that. I asked Ken Davenport, who's a very famous entrepreneur, Broadway producer, how do you keep people who do the same performances twice a day, 6 months a year, to be equally exciting and charismatic on stage? And it's, you know, love what you do what you love. It doesn't matter. It's not work to them. That's where they get joy. It was really great for me to speak with Andrew Sanula, who's on the U.S. rugby team and was a key member a few years ago, about how he went through a down cycle in his life and recaptured the original joy, just going back to his roots. You know, when I was a kid, I learned how to play rugby, and that's how I bonded with my poor family and with the community. And it was great lessons learned, and we talked about rugby, of course. And one of our clients at T-Mobile, Cali Field, which is a US telco, pioneered a lot of very great groundbreaking stuff in customer care, treating customers like individuals, having the same people talk to them from call to call, not just into some IVR technology-driven solution. And she talked about the joy of giving people their first job. For many people in call centers, this is their first job. And it's very diversity friendly and all. So some of these themes are very clear in how they can apply to the workplace. And in season 2, we were going to do some more discussions with actual people going into the business world. So I was going to go back to my alma mater at Harvard Business School and MIT with a client who's a CEO there to talk about what do the future workers look for in terms of choice of employer. So that's maybe an example of sort of how we've explored, and I've explored the joy at work topic more generally. Maybe the next page.
I would like to ask you a question.
Yeah, sure.
You haven't covered that yet, and I'm really intrigued about that. What brought you to the theme of joy? How did you get there?
I think there's some self-serving aspect of this, because obviously leading a company of globally distributed, high achieving, high energy, high expectation company, they want more than just job satisfaction and high pay. They want purpose. So for me, in leading a company and in leading clients who are paying us to help them lead their company, this whole untapped potential, unlocked energy in the workforce, culture, EQ being more important than IQ, is very important from just a professional standpoint. And then from a personal standpoint, obviously, I think I was born happy. And I like to be half full versus half empty. I like to bring the optimism to it. So it's a positivity. So it's a very interesting combination, but it works for me. And I think it's a topic that does have some resonance, hopefully beyond just what we do day to day ourselves.
It's going to have more and more, like with people like you influencing about it.
Hopefully it's a positive viral impact to have people, because people are humans at the end of the day. One of the panelists here told me, he said, well, the first workplace is the schoolyard, the playground, when you're 5 to 7 years old, right? At that point, you don't care, who you play with, if it's a male or female, it's a new person, it's an immigrant, it's someone that's new to the neighborhood, it's someone older or younger. You just want to tackle the jungle gym and the swings together and have fun together. Absolutely. So if we can bring back to the simplicity of the first workplace and what makes that fun, it'll make all of our lives so much more valuable and productive. And happy people obviously make happy workers and happy customers, and you've seen the retention, loyalty numbers, and so it's all self-serving at eventually some point, but it's probably the right thing to do as a human standpoint too. Thank you. Yep.
So I'll go to the next slide.
Yeah, next slide. We just have a few more, and then I'd like to get questions from the folks here. So, I mean, there's some themes here. These were themes that were happening pre-COVID. The importance of bringing your whole brain, the definition of diversity, being the best version of yourself, being seen as who you are, whether it's sexual identity, whether it's gender, whether it's ethnic. So I think the imperative for leaders is to provide that opportunity for people to be themselves, bring their best self to work. And then now, in a world of joy from home, how do you transmit intimacy, purpose, delegation, communications, passion while you're physically separated from each other? I'll explore that in a little bit more, how I've seen that done, but it can be done. Work-life integration is critical. We get to see each other in our more vulnerable state and environments. You're in my home now. I'm in your home. So joy from home has even more relevance because now the home is the workplace. The joy at work and home is the same. And of course, in the recent months, again, these were trends that were disturbing and under the surface for hundreds of years, which is the diversity, equity, and inclusion agenda. We all need to be allies to have people feel equally respected in the workplace and in society. And you can't have joy without justice. When you have people that are not supported and actually victims in agony and don't feel anyone they can talk to, they don't have role models, they don't have mentors, they don't have mental health support systems. These are things that we need to provide as leaders of companies and countries to provide that to our employees and people that look to us for leadership. So I think joy from work and from home and in the community is more relevant than ever. Next page. And I think amid the lockdown, I think it's tested us in many ways. I think for us as leaders, there are several things that we need to continue to do. I think we need to create and reassert the purpose of who we are. If we're a client service business, if we're a customer friendly business, if we're a company sensitive business on health, we need to show that care, but also continue to care about the problems of people that we're being paid to help serve. We also need to, I believe, and I've learned this too, is to reinforce the time aspect of this. We are in a cycle. We are in a react mode, or we are in recovery, or we are in rebound and reinvention mode. This helps calm everyone. It gives them a sense of peace that this is a journey. It's a cycle where we will come to the end of this tunnel. There's also a feeling of connectivity that needs to happen. So, there's obviously technology that allows this. I had never been on a Zoom call until 2 months ago. I know the difference between WebEx and Zoom and Teams, and some are good, some are bad, some have better visuals. But more importantly, using the technology to get to the core issues. One of the problems that we have with a lot of our younger staff is now they feel like there's no boundaries. So because you don't have to travel anymore, you don't have this buffer to go to work or to travel to a client that's in another time zone. But acknowledging that you have your space and you're working in a work-life mode that has to be balanced is very critical. So we need to connect people in different ways in this new world. And we need to find a way to enjoy each other in a virtual way. We've got virtual happy hours. One thing that we did in our European, just go back one page, Ralph, I think, yes, I think if you look on the lower right, we had, you have to replace what you do physically in a virtual world. So you have the virtual happy hours. We also had a competition and almost a talent show of our units in Europe. So we had started off with Iberia, then France, then UK, Benelux, Nordic, Germany, Australia, and Italy. And each of them had a 3-minute skit that they did virtually kicking a football, virtually having music. And they shared that in a sort of semi-competition week to week. And it built a great deal of camaraderie. We're in this together, but we also can do fun things together. And we had a global talent show on that. And then the Australians came in, they did a Saturday Night Fever skit. So there are ways that you can still have harmony, impact, and acknowledgement even in a virtual world. The last slide I'll have, if you at the next page before Q&A, is that obviously there's some technical and technological answers to working from home. To continue that level of leadership authenticity, you have the tools and rules and the rituals and roles. I would guess as leaders, we need to set boundaries on what it is that is work-life balance and integration and respect that. And we need to continue to have the same discipline that we have in our workplace. I think one of the good things about the COVID situation is that it's simplified and clarified where we really need to add value. Do we really need to have this whole level of desktop supervision and meetings, people setting up meetings to set up meetings? So the risk of, the middle of the company and adding value there has become more clear. But if you can focus on the outcomes, focus on the real core root, these tools, rules, rituals, and roles can be replicated even in a virtual world. And we've seen it done in ourselves. We're purely people. We have no other assets except people. And we find ourselves and our clients to be very open and adapted to this new world, Ralph. I'll leave it there. I've spoken a bit, maybe too much. Happy to take questions. Thank you for your intervention. Ask me any tough question you want.
Yeah, you haven't been talking too much at all.
Okay.
Actually, on the last slide, would you be willing to go a little bit more into the concrete, to be more specific about how to apply the points that you have? Because you covered it very on a macro level. But yeah. What would you? What are the specific actions you would recommend?
Yeah. No, I think one of the things that it's good for, again, we are in our business, I can only speak for our business, and maybe I'll comment a little bit on our clients who are in different sectors and different geographies in different countries. But for us as a B2B person business, it's very important for us to have clear work charters and be able to do that in a virtual way. So you used to have meetings and get together and then you dial in people on the phone. Now we just do that instantly, globally. We can do projects in a much more immediate way just by a click of a button. So on the rules, we still do the work chartering that you need in that type of fast-paced, agile project type of world. And most of our clients are trying to move to agile. But the one difference is being much more clear about boundaries, that even though you don't have travel, you're not 24/7. And that creates the work life and lack of joy metrics that we talked about. So I think on the upper right, very important for us in a virtual world to have the same discipline on work charters, but just apply it in a, I think, much more compassionate way, because we do understand that there are younger folks that they're sharing a Wi-Fi bandwidth connection with maybe 2 other roommates in a 2-bedroom place versus some people that have very different work situations, or even have to go to the old office because there was no space at home. The stuff on the lower left, the rituals are very understandable. The thing that we have added is the fun part. You have to have the sort of quizzes, the hackathons, the happy hours, the celebrations, the happy hours, but continue to do that in a virtual way. There's no reason why you can't enjoy each other that way. And the side benefit also is when you do open up person-to-person meetings, it makes them much more, can you imagine how much more impactful and material that meeting will be? In terms of roles, again, this is, again, part of the work charter addendum here, but just having those more frequent and regular check-ins on a virtual basis can be done. Those that are managing teams and are partners that are leading teams and managers that are leading junior teams have to self-correct themselves not to overmanage just because you can click a button and say, can I talk to you in 30 minutes about this? So we've seen these general principles apply to our clients as well. they're more at the level of, do we want people outside the firewall coming into our firewall? So we're going to be for the next 6 to 9 months working virtually. So they're learning from us how to apply these tools, rules, rituals, and roles. And they're also being asked concretely, why do we have these departments and functions? If in a virtual world, it doesn't seem like we need all these support infrastructure. So there's some other operating model questions that come up when you work in this world too, but that's a separate topic, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I have to stop the sharing because I'm not able to see the Q&A, unfortunately.
Okay, no problem. Thank you.
So, okay.
Click on the Q&A.
So 2 questions, they're upvoted. So let's start with the first one. What should I do tomorrow with my team to improve the joy?
Well, I mean, I think it would be first what I would do is, have an honest conversation with your teams about where they are. What is inspiring them? What makes them feel recognized? Do they have role clarity? I think to start with reality is the first, but before you start overlaying this grand objective, what is the definition of joy? How is that different from happiness? How do you can't transmit that, that's individual. You can have all kinds of philosophical distractions, but the first thing that we've done, and I've seen done best, is to get a proper baseline of where is there a joy gap? What is the level of engagement, inclusion, harmony, impact, acknowledgement in the current team? And then you can have the conversation about, well, we need better and more responsible work charters, or we need to have more regular communication. We need to have a statement of purpose for the company. All I'm doing is working for a salary. Is there anything bigger? I think we found that was a way to open up people's eyes to what you can do differently. So it shouldn't be a top-down exercise. It should be bottoms-up as well, and understand. That's what I would say to do. And of course, there are some lessons learned from some of these, the podcasts, et cetera, about how to implement that. The level of communication, your level of support behind things, the commitment to people care, funding, mental health and awareness, ombudsman's programs. So there's a whole list of things that could be helpful.
Okay, it sounds, when I listen to what you're saying, it sounds like a global strategic transformation, which is one of the specialties of Kearney. But this really, it means that you need to have a transformation in your mindset, in your culture. It's not something that happens overnight. It needs a lot of preparation and communication all around. So that's like a huge change. Are there any quick recommendations you would give to someone that they could just start doing tomorrow before even entering such a global exercise?
Yeah, no, I think you're right about the global exercise, and the people agenda is usually the most overlooked agenda by executives in almost every consulting assignment that I've ever seen. It's not just the answer, it's how it's being delivered and how it's going to be digested. I mean, to me, maybe some of the most immediate things you can do, because people want to be seen, is a commitment personally to people bringing their whole selves. That's the real bottleneck to people being happy. They feel they can only bring a part of themselves, or they're only being asked to do a task, or they're only a functional finance person and they're not a contributor. So I think the team leader has a direct responsibility, in my view, to make it safe for people to bring their whole selves. Now that sounds like a very theoretical thing, but it is cascading to the way you communicate. They're not with your employee. They're not just employees. They are not just people to do a task. They're not just people to manage to 2-week timetable.
They're not resources. They're not just resources.
They're not just resources, that's right. And they have different ways of communicating. I mean, the problem with most people, this is about the toxic people in teams. That's another question that came up. Yeah. The reason why people fail as executives and leaders is they think the world acts like them. They make decisions based on them. They're a why person, not a how person, the 4 parts of the brain. So I think it does get back to the golden rule and some things that your mother and father taught you when you were younger. Treat people the way you'd like to be treated. Allow and understand and respect differences. Don't expect them to follow your model or your leadership model, by the way. Be inclusive. I think those are some lessons learned, I would say, and it cascades down to your data. If you have even one person reporting to you, I think they want to feel like you treat them equally, not just as a factor of production or a factor of delivery. Yeah.
So what about that question about toxic people in your teams? Would you treat them equally as well?
Well, obviously, you know, what do you do with toxic people? You either fix them, remove them, or you try to help them. I guess you got to make that management decision. Are they structurally toxic? Are they toxic because they're not self-aware? Are they toxic because they're not situationally aware? And what are the levers that are reasonable and fair to pull? You know, obviously you have people that are bad all around, and I think they either need to get coached or they need to get out. I mean, that's just a simple rule. You know, you can take as long time as you need, I suppose.
So let me have you reflect on how we recommend leaders to treat this point. When you have people that are clearly toxic, they must be removed. I mean, toxic behavior must be removed. People are not per se toxic. Maybe something is making them toxic, but toxic behavior like backstabbing, betrayal, spreading rumors, false rumors, lying, violence, physical, but also verbal violence, humiliation, all these kinds of stuff are toxic behaviors that are unacceptable and cannot be tolerated. Intolerance, racism, sexual discrimination, any kind of discrimination is intolerable. So, and this has to be clearly stated by the company that kind of behavior is unacceptable. When it happens, what we recommend is a three conversation sequence. The first conversation is, look, we have this. These rules, this context, these agreements, this culture, that those things cannot happen within our organization. When you started working with us, you implicitly or explicitly accepted to behave by those rules and to respect them. These are the rules that have been agreed by the entire organization and by all the people working together. And we are a team. If you do not follow the agreements that you committed yourself to follow, what does that mean about your commitment to be part of the team? Because these are our common values, and you're saying I'm not following them. So what are you saying to us? That you don't want to be part of the team? Let us clarify that. That's the first conversation, where usually the end is like, okay, I'm going to change my behavior, or I understand. Okay. It happens again. There's a second conversation in which it's very simple. It's like, there was a first conversation. We thought we were quite clear and we understood each other. What did not come over? Where did we misunderstand each other? And at the end of that conversation, the tone is changing. The tone becomes like, you don't want to have a third conversation on this topic, because you're not going to like that. And by doing that, you're having a fair culture where everybody knows that toxic behavior is being dealt with, but also that a person is not just getting removed or fired without a proper and objective warning. Of course, you need to have all the facts. So what do you think about these three steps? Of course, the last step is just to terminate the relationship.
Well, I think it's a logical and fair process. I think you can, in some situations, you can go straight to conversation 3 if it really is that is really that serious. Because I think we take it very seriously. You know, essential rightness, the code of conduct is something that people in our firm have to sign every year, and it's very comprehensive. You know, how you treat people, how you treat information, how you treat the community, and any breach of that is grounds for dismissal. You know that, we know that, and we know what it means when you breach that. I think those are clear cases often, I think, Ralph. The situations that you're dealing with and referring to are probably those where it's unclear whether it's about self-awareness, short-term behavioral modification, or it really is the person in the wrong role and in the wrong company, or probably in the wrong business. So I think that's, your process seems logical to me. I would not question, but it could be accelerated, I guess, in some cases, right? You know, how much leeway do you get? Because I mean, there are situations that we all take that are just immediate. It's very clear.
Yeah, if you have physical violence or humiliation or discrimination, these are immediate, or theft or damaging sabotage. Of course, there you go to step 3. I agree with you.
Absolutely. No, I think that's right. Yeah.
There's a third question. How do you manage your manager? I guess it's bottom up, to integrate such good concepts and attitudes? Tough
Yeah,
one.
I mean, yeah. I think there's 2 avenues generally. One is, I mean, there's probably structural and formal ways to provide feedback. I mean, what we do is we're trying to move and create a revolution in feedback, because it's always difficult for someone junior to provide honest feedback directly. It's called, you've heard of the Net Promoter Score for client services and customer services and products. We talk about a net followership score. So now, instead of evaluating people, we just say, well, we're asking people anonymously who work for you whether or not they would want to work with you again, or whether they would recommend someone else to work with you. And reasons why. Oh, they were, they didn't respect work-life boundaries. They were unreasonable. They were rude, or they were whatever. So I think a longer term institutionally, you need to have the right feedback mechanisms to provide all your team leaders with that type of reality check. And we believe, and I believe, that people want to get better. If they just don't know about it and don't realize that their net followership score was -17 and it should be +40, that's the beginning of an awakening and discovery. I think your manager also probably needs to have good managers who have taught them a little bit more about the importance of teamwork and collaboration, harmony, impact, acknowledgement. Depending on your relationship, obviously it's good to provide and ask for those moments of truth to say, how is it going? I mean, we always have, at least in all my project teams, we always have a ways of working day or session each week. How are we doing things differently? Are we being too relaxed? Are we being too bold? Are we communicating enough? Are we, sort of just having the honest conversation within the team, and maybe not just making it one-on-one. How can we have a better working environment is probably a very practical way, but having a structured, agreed upon process for that to come out in a safe way. So there's the anonymous version, and then there's also the safe space version of maybe addressing some of these questions implicit in that.
Okay. So I think you gave a good answer for the organizational structure in order to stimulate managers to become better managers, better versions of themselves, because they have this net followers scale or
feedback
score.
In their evaluation. Yeah, I think it impacts their evaluation as well, right? Yeah.
Now the question here is really a tough one. You're part of a team. Your manager is not really positive. How do you manage that? As a team member, how do you, or as a manager, but reporting to someone who is not so nice, not so joyful, and not so supportive of joy?
Yeah, no, I mean, we've all been in those situations. I'm thinking back now, what did I do and what could I have done differently? Obviously, this is a world, and you're pointing us out correctly. It's not about having the right IQ of the answer, but it's the EQ. I don't know. Again, it depends on the communications receptiveness, self-awareness of the person you're dealing with. It depends on your own communication skills. Maybe there are influencers that could give them that feedback that you can't provide directly, but I don't know why a direct conversation wouldn't be the best answer. This is like, just like you would if you were in a personal, situation in a family matter. If we all have the same commitment to the team outcome, the same urgency. When you ask for this, it's creating this impression, and it's actually creating more stress than less. I'm sure you want less stress, and you want just ways of communicating it. But there's no substitute for honesty. The institutional support that needs to be there is, that you don't get, retaliated for providing feedback, or they do a downward valuation that reflects that. I mean, again, that gets back to how the company evaluates managers. So it has to be a self-reinforcing loop. Tough problem though. I wish I had the answer to every situation, but I don't.
If I may, I think indeed what you said is you need to approach to talk about this. You need to have an honest conversation, unless you can bring, like you said, you can bring this to attention of influencers who can bring this up. What I would strongly recommend, it depends of the person. You have to really know who's the person you're talking to. Some people have very long toes and big egos, and they can they have very little tolerance to anything that comes close to criticism. Even if it's not criticism, they take it as criticism, and then you're in a tougher situation. But I would talk about yourself. I would talk about, look, I'm seeking to have more joy at work, and I would like to see how we can together create an atmosphere in which we can be more joyful. And especially now, with the context, there's so much tension in the market, and it's not clear, and there's confusion, and so I need now more of that. And I would be thankful if we could create some format or some forum to talk about this without pointing the finger at the manager and telling him or her, look, when you're doing that, it has a bad influence on me. If you have a person who is willing to accept that, then it's fine. But usually if the person is not that joyful, I'm...
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the joy is a very conceptual, and it means a lot to different people. Like in this next question here, I mean, you could use even the terminology of the research, the harmony, impact, and acknowledgement. You know, you say, here's what's keeping our team from greatness. I don't have role clarity. Why am I doing this person's work, or why are you doing my work, for example? Or I'm not sure why am I doing this low value work? It's not leading to the outcome that our client asked us to do. Or I'm not being acknowledged. I worked 24 hours a day yesterday and over the weekend, and I need a time off. I need acknowledgement, at least that I'm doing it. So I mean, you could use the aspects of what makes you unjoyful, so to speak, to get to that happier spot. Yeah.
There was a question that somebody sent me before our webinar, and during our conversation before the webinar a few days ago, you mentioned that element. I don't have the mail in front of me, but it's about the current context with social inequality and racism and all these tensions. How can you create a climate of joy within such a negative environment all around?
Yes, yeah. I think we have to tackle the root problems, because if your employees are distracted, upset, crying, agonizing about the things that are happening to them, their community, or even the broader country, you can't have a productive, constructive workplace. So it's so critical to have those basic aspects of acknowledgement of what's going on outside the world and how it affects your individual communities. So like any other firm, we have a broad set of supportive interdependent communities. We have Black at Kearney, we have the LGBTQ plus environment, we have the women's network, and they are self-reinforcing on some of the issues that keep people from feeling that they're fully respected and in a fair and just world. Those issues outside reinforce, well, how can we have a fair and just society in our own workplace? Do we have commitments to the same diversity, equity, and inclusion topics as the rest of the world should? And so I'm very proud of the fact that we have been very committed, and it's reinforcing to our employees that we've made external commitments, we've made external pronouncements, commitments to change on the justice agenda, the equity agenda, the inclusion agenda, bold steps in terms of representation, funding, new programs, et cetera. And I think that reinforces the sense that individuals who believe it just as strongly feel connected to the firm. They feel that there is harmony, impact, and acknowledgement of the things that are important to them, and make them feel even more loyal to the team because you are much more aligned together. So it's a very important priority these days. And in some sense, in the last 6 months, we've had 3 years in the space of 3 months, all these crises: economic crisis, a health crisis, and a justice crisis. But I'm happy to say, if we did our global engagement survey, that our employees feel that we have responded, for example, to these environments in a very positive way in terms of the communication, the authenticity, the commitment to these similar causes. But it's important, you're right, absolutely. There's no joy without justice.
Is there the engagement survey, is that the 5 minutes survey you do every 6 months?
Yes, yes.
Okay, and I was going to ask you about that. What do you do with the results?
Well, there's a fair amount of cascading it. We make all the results for every unit, every demographic, every level available to the partners who are leading teams and units and geographies. And then we have we set aside a day of discussion with our staff to say, well, why is it that we improved here? Well, how can we do better on apprenticeship? Why do people feel that the belonging score went down? Oh, it's great that our engagement and communication score is good. So we use it as a basis for talking about our work and how we can improve the working. So I think it has to be not just something that bubbles up to the planning bubble. It has to be discussed so that it becomes part of the culture. That's how we use it. It's really interesting. You take these 19 questions, and then it's really the science and the algorithm behind it that does the correlation and the summary. It's actually not like the old school surveys that I certainly grew up with, right? Do you want to buy this product or not? It's a very sophisticated technique, and that's why it allows the 5 minutes is amazing. People love that, and we have like 85% of the all employees be able to complete it. So it's a very high compliance rate too.
Yeah. I had a question. Yeah. What is the difference? I mean, we're talking now about engagement, and according to scientific research, engagement is clearly a very strong contributor to corporate performance, individual performance, team performance, human performance. Engagement is directly linked to that. What's the difference between engagement and joy?
I think it's a good correlation. In fact, we never in the original survey, we never asked, "Are you joyful?" That sounded a little bit too up there. We asked about engagement. I think engagement, and now we do ask, but I think engagement is as close in that 19 questions, a close surrogate for the level of care, commitment, feeling of acknowledgement, feeling connected with the firm and with each other and our teams. I mean, we've had this semi-philosophical discussion in the podcast about, well, what's the difference between joy, engagement, and happiness? And everyone is interesting, had their own view of that. Joy is this, happiness is that. But my own definition, again, and you can take it for what it's worth, happiness has to be the direction, right? It's not just an outcome, because actually the research shows that people that focus on happiness as an outcome are the least happy. Because they always said there's 7 things they got to do, and then they only get 5 of them, and they feel, well, I'm not happy. I only got 5 out of 7. Happiness has to be the direction of your life, but joy has to be the force. It's the juice. It's the energy. And if you were mathematically inclined in high school, a vector is force and direction. So if the direction is happiness, joy is the day-to-day force that gives you the engagement to stay on that journey. But anyway, it's an interesting topic, and there are whole books, and you can Google it. There's 75 different books on different definitions of what it means. But you got to pick one that works for you and your company. What will improve engagement? What will improve satisfaction?
Yeah. Okay, we're almost done in terms of time. There's a last question. What are the questions of the joy survey or the engagement survey? Are you using a format that is predefined, or did you develop your own?
Yeah, it was not the latest technology and survey. It was just simple questions that we asked these global survey, and it's in the HBR article. I'll send it to you, or you can send it to your community as well, Yannick. It's from the July 2019 Harvard Business Review. It doesn't have the actual survey question. It has the survey answers, sort of how things were linked together on that. But it asks some similar questions to the global engagement survey. Are you happy at work? Why are you not happy? Do you feel acknowledged? So it's kind of a precursor to our global engagement survey too.
Any closing remarks, Alex?
My only one is a positive one, which is I think the world is half full, not half empty. And I think you can achieve greatness by your individual choices day to day. You can be a multiplier of this topic and lead by example. This is not some theoretical academic exercise. It's about the people agenda, and you are people. So you can change this day one, just like some of the questions asked about.
I want to thank you so much for participating in this webinar. The recording is going to be available. It's going also to stay live on, not live, the live streaming is going to stay on Facebook on our page. So people can log into it and look at it later on. It was great talking to you. Very interesting, very inspiring. Thank you once again.
Well, thank you, Ralph, for having me, and have a great day. Bye now.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Bye, Alex. Bye, everyone.
Bye.